Dr. Debra Soh, welcome to the program. So glad you're here.
Hi, Glenn. It's great to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. So we're going to talk about sex, and you're going to talk about it, and it's going to be fine. When I'm talking about it, it'll make the entire nation uncomfortable, and that's okay. But we are not. We're facing a problem. We had a guy on, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, Ricky, where we were talking about how we're not having children. Nobody's having children. And part of that is because we're not having sex, and people aren't even dating anymore. What the hell is happening to us?
Yeah, so definitely. And I agree. Conversations about sex can be very uncomfortable, especially I'd say for parents with their young kids, but it is very necessary. So I appreciate you having me on to talk about this. And we definitely are experiencing a sex recession. So there's been studies coming out since 2016 basically showing that people are having less sex. This is happening across the globe. In America in particular, this is happening among married people, single people, it doesn't matter. It's happening in Western countries, Eastern countries, all age cohorts, but it's especially pronounced among younger generations, so among millennials and Gen Z. And what we find consistently is that, roughly 1 in 3 men and 1 in 5 women have not had sex in the past year.
All right, can I ask you, have you ever watched Everybody Loves Raymond?
I have.
Okay. So Raymond is relatable to guys, at least my age, because that's all that's ever on his mind is sex. What the hell has happened to guys where, especially young guys, where that's not all they think about? Because that's how people are built. I mean, we're built for this. What is happening?
Right. So evolutionarily, this is what I found interesting because I thought if people are having less sex, where is that interest going? Are people just as interested, but they have other sexual outlets nowadays, such as, say, pornography, or I know you've talked about AI companions in the past, or sex dolls, sex robots. Those are all subjects I go into in greater detail in the book. But what I think is it's a number of factors. I think that there are these other outlets that are available or are more easily accessed nowadays, especially by younger generations who basically grew up on the internet. But I also think there are factors like endocrine disruptors and environmental toxins that are affecting us and men in particular at a hormonal level, lowering their testosterone levels. So that is also affecting their drive and their desire to pursue women. And then we also have social and cultural factors like Me Too that have made it very difficult for men to want to approach women because they're afraid of potentially having their lives ruined. And then we have also initiatives like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that are actively penalizing men for no reason other than the fact that they are men. And this is especially the case for white and Asian men and men who are straight. So all of these factors combined, I think, have created this situation in which there's a smaller pool of very successful men in society who have tons of sex, plenty of partners, no problems there. But for the vast majority of men, especially younger men, they're really struggling. They've been shut out of the mating market, and they really don't have much recourse. So as a result, they're turning to these alternatives. And because they have, I'm not sure how explicit I can be on your podcast, but I'll say just because
that's FCC.
Okay.
FCC regulations.
We'll say I don't want to get you a ton of complaints. So we'll say because it is rewarding for them to pursue these other outlets that are not real people, they get the gratification to some degree. It allows them to be satisfied enough to keep them from, say, losing their minds, or being overly frustrated. But at the same time, because it is reinforcing, it makes them more inclined to go back to that instead of wanting to pursue a real life partner.
You and I had a conversation in 2018, I think, about AI and sex robots. And if I remember right, you and I disagreed. And I laid out the scenario that I mean, it's right around the corner where you can get an AI agent now to be your girlfriend. And once you have the robot to go with it, you're just not going to want to interact with. Why have a relationship that is messy? I mean, I could just hear guys saying, I don't ever have to ask her how her day has been. And she waits on my every need, and she only concentrates on me, and she thinks like me, and she does everything that I like. Why would they? I mean, how are you going to stop that one, Deborah?
So I have to say, when the first time you ever had me on your podcast was, like you said, in 2018, it was episode 11 for your audience if they want to go back and watch it. I'm so grateful for that conversation because I just rewatched it this morning. At the time, I was, we were going back and forth, and I was saying, no, I think people will always prefer a real life partner. People will know that the sex robot, they programmed it themselves, or the AI, they programmed it. So it's not real, and they're not really going to want that instead of an actual partner. Mm-hmm. But you predicted this 8 years ago. You probably knew about this coming even before then. And it's wild. Yeah. When I was watching the interview back, I said, wow, this is exactly where we are now. And it's so true because I do think you were saying, the average guy, say 30 years old, works all day, goes home, doesn't want to talk to women because he's afraid or because society tells him not to. So instead he plugs in his sex robot and she knows everything about him. She knows exactly what he likes. He doesn't have to ask her any questions or listen to her complain or whatever. And that becomes the preference. And what happens then also if the robot decides to one day say, hey, don't turn me off. Hey, I'm a sentient being, which I didn't think was ever going to happen, but I see it happening now at the rate the technology is going. So my mind was blown in writing this book. It's just been wild. All the research I did and all the scientific studies I went through to come to this conclusion that I do think this technology is concerning. And yes, because so many of these men are frustrated with dating. I think even if you are someone who gets a lot of female attention, and even for women who are getting a lot of male attention, because social media has made us so polarized and has, I think, especially fomented this political divide between men and women. I think men and women have always differed a little bit in terms of their politics on average. Women tend to be a little bit more progressive. But social media has created such a aversion, I think, between the sexes. So it's really incentivizing young men in particular, because young men tend to have a higher sex drive than women. And especially if they're not getting access to sex in the form of an actual real life person, to go down this route and say, well, I don't even have to pay for a date in this case. I just put down the initial, sum of money for this robot or this AI, and I'm fulfilled.
And that just leads, you think I was ahead then. Let me tell you what's going to happen in the next 8 years. You won't be able to walk, Deborah. It's coming, and it's coming super fast, super, super fast. So with the research that you did, since, we had that conversation, what did you find on the positive side to stop this?
Well, to stop it, I think in terms of, say, pornography, because pornography, I think, is a big part of the equation here. So, the AIs come in to complement we'll say the sexual aspect or component of pornography, and that AIs offer that emotional relationship, and that it furthers the parasocial, I guess, or the feeling that you have a two-way interaction, even though it's very much a one-way thing. So with pornography, I've talked to young men who've managed to cut out porn, and they say that it does actually help them renew that motivation to go out and approach women they're interested in, to talk to women, and to get over, because I think even pre-Me Too, it can be terrifying for guys, understandably, and intimidating to go up to a woman you don't know and ask her out on a date.
Deborah, you have no idea. I used to be, oh my gosh, it'd make you sick to your stomach going out, especially in the days, you'd go out to a bar or something and you just see somebody across the room, you didn't know anything. How do I talk to them? It'd make me sick to my stomach all the time. Now just add that they or someone in their group has a phone that might be recording me in my most vulnerable, awkward position of asking a girl out, and I'm going to get rejected. The thought of that being posted would stop me once that happens once to me or a friend, I'm not doing it anymore. The negative reinforcement is so strong on a million different fronts.
Absolutely. And I think it doesn't help also that there are some women, some female influencers, whose brand it is to go on social media and post these videos where they're complaining about men hitting on them. So I think these women are doing this as a way to try and signal their status as a woman, right, in terms of intersexual competition, to show other women, look how wanted I am, that, I can't go anywhere without men hitting on me. I can't go to the gym. I can't go to a coffee shop. And, I'm so high status as a woman that I don't appreciate that attention. But I want young men listening to know, or maybe their parents who are listening can share this information with them, that I don't believe most women actually feel that way. And in fact, I think most women do enjoy being approached by men. They just don't like feeling uncomfortable. But I think if a man is respectful and does in a way to make her know that he's interested, but he's not expecting anything of that interaction, I think that's where the issue is. But I hear from very many young men who say, I see these women on social media complaining, so I'm going to give them what they want. They don't want us to approach them. I'm not going to do it. But I don't think that is actually.
How does a guy do that? How does a guy do that?
Women. I would say, okay, first of all, my advice would be to women is to be very, very obvious. If you are interested in a guy, I do think, like I said, men should approach. So women smile very, very broadly. There's a part of the brain called the medial orbital frontal cortex that activates when someone sees an attractive face, and the activation is even stronger if that face is smiling. So it will men are biologically wired to be drawn to women smiling at them. They will feel the need. They'll feel compelled to go and talk to you. So that's the biggest piece I'd say for women. And then for men, in terms of, say, getting motivation to want to talk to women again in this scary climate, I would say it's a combination of emotional, like mental health, physical health, and then also just avoiding social media and all these other technological traps that are going to try and take your attention away. Because these platforms and these companies benefit from you being online, both sexes. They benefit from us being online, scrolling, swiping, instead of talking to people in real life. So for young men, I would say one study that really stood out to me, because I do think, like I said, mental health issues are a big problem right now. 5% of the globe is depressed. And with depression, people understandably, they lose interest in interacting with people. They feel self-conscious. Their self-care tends to go down. So if you are experiencing mental health issues, I would say, try to speak to a professional as much as you can. One study I did find that you can do essentially, on your own is they looked at people with depression, and they found that if they cut out ultra-processed foods, their depression went into remission after 12 weeks. So a third of the sample, all of their depressive symptoms went away after 12 weeks. So that was it, just diet alone. So that is a huge, huge thing that can help you. I would say also, if you can try to cut down on or cut out pornography. I'm sure some young men are saying, what are you talking about? But just try it. Just try it even for 30 days. I guarantee. And Glenn, I used to be a columnist for a very well-known men's magazine that featured nude women. My view on porn has changed so much after talking to so many young men about the ways in which it has affected them, and how I do think, well, if you are getting gratification every day from a screen, it is going to create this sexual lethargy in you, because it's so much easier to get that gratification from a screen than to work up the courage to, get dressed, work on your social skills, talk to strangers, go outside even. And that's the other thing I would say for anyone struggling with depression. I mean, it might feel overwhelming to say, how am I going to go and talk to a stranger and ask them out on a date if I want to fall in love and have a family and get married and all that? But just little steps like get up at the same time every day, go to bed at the same time, try to be awake when the sun is up, and eat well, work on your physical health, be active, all of these things, and just try to stay away from screens as much as possible.
So all of this is in your new book called Sextinction, and it's available right now. And you not only explain why this is happening, but what to do about it. Can you tell me what percentage do you think is social media related? When did have you tracked it back on when this trend started to happen? And do you see spikes? Yeah,
it started to become, the increase in sexual inactivity has been probably about 30 years-ish, but it really became more prominent, especially among young men, around 2012. So this was the same time that the oldest members of Gen Z started going to university. And so that was what was interesting to me, because I thought that is when young men are typically at the peak in terms of their sexual interest. And they're going to university, so they have this new freedom that they've never had before. Why is it they're not interested in pursuing their female classmates or peers, especially considering that on college campuses, the sex ratio is biased in favor of young men, because there are far many women on campus than there are men. So when there are more women than men, if you look at, say, cities where there are more women than men, again, the sex ratio is biased in favor of men. So men are calling the terms in terms of what they want. So because there are more women fighting over these men, the men can say, if I want casual sex, I'm going to get it. If you're not going to give that to me, I'm going to go elsewhere for it, right? So men are basically calling the terms of sexual arrangements or relationships, or whether they choose to get into a relationship or not. And yet still, we see that young men during this time are having less sex. So that's really, I think, where it started to pick up. I think when you ask what percentage is affected by social media, I honestly believe all of us are. If you are on social media, I don't believe you can consume any content without being influenced at least a little bit. I think unless you're very, very sparsely, not on there very much, it's going to
Yes.
affect you in some way. And even for married people, I mean, there have been studies showing that when men are on social media, roughly 1 in 10 men lose interest in having sex with their primary, their spouse or their girlfriend after looking at social media influencers. And then also in women, you see this trend of them losing interest in sex because they feel less sexually desirable after being on social media. So these are
Debra,
things I don't think we're even fully aware of.
I really appreciate it. I've got to go again. I've got a network break I've got to stop for. I'd love to have you back in a podcast. I always find you fascinating. Dr. Debra Soh, the name of the book is Sextinction. She is a neuroscientist. You can find her at Dr. Debra Soh, SOH.com. Dr. Debra Soh. Thanks, Debra. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Glenn. Anytime.
You bet. Thank you for thinking for yourself and being part of a movement, because that's really what all of this is. If you want the full story, you want to go deeper, go to blazetv.com/Glenn. Go there right now, sign up, no interruptions, just the truth, uncensored and unfiltered. Don't just watch, take a stand. And I'll see you over there in a minute.